So our hope is that this panel can open up doors for you guys to discuss mental health amongst each other, because this issue is not something that is an isolated incident that can be addressed with one 50-minute panel with just 6 speakers. It's up to us to create the conversation around mental health. So when it comes to the question and answer session, write down maybe a topic or a question that you want to see addressed by the panel members here, and hopefully the perspectives and the insights that they can offer can be adopted by each and every one of us to cater to both our own mental health and to address the stigma at Mission and kind of dismantle the culture that can affect so many of us so negatively. So we're going to start our event by having our speakers introduce themselves and speak a little bit about why they're here.
Hi, so my name is Emily, and I'm a current junior. And so I know a lot of people think junior year is the hardest year, and that's why I'm up here, because I have I'm a junior and I get so stressed. But for me, it was actually kind of the opposite, where my underclassmen years were the worst, because what happened was I put myself under tons of stress, and it actually wasn't the fault of my parents. I'm very lucky to have very supportive parents, and so I always got the hardest schedule I could get. I was always studying. I was like, I don't want to go out. I need to work. If I don't get good grades, this is it. These 4 years are the most important 4 years of my life, because this will determine what college I'm going to get into. College is going to determine what job determines your life. And I was like, I need to do well. And so I would never get enough sleep. I was always really stressed out, but I was also really good at hiding it. And so I don't want to say I was suffering in silence, because it sounds really melodramatic, but that really was what I was doing. I was just suffering and not telling anyone about it. But what happened was I got really sick. I got pneumonia for maybe 2 weeks, and it really freaked out my parents, and so they forced me to take a not as heavy schedule as I would have liked to, and I really agonized over this for a long time, but it's done wonders for my mental health. And so I really want to speak today on this panel so that other underclassmen or people who feel they don't have a right to complain realize that their issues are valid. All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Harshita. I'm an alum. I graduated last year, so class of 2016. I'm here to talk about my struggle with depressive symptoms, anxiety, and panic attacks. I've been going to therapy for, I think, almost 3 years now. Yeah, 3 years now. I recently went on medication. Just to talk about what it's like to be a high school student in therapy, receiving mental health care, and what the college healthcare system is like now that I'm at Harvard.
Hi, I'm Rochelle Ogundelli. I'm with Stanford University Center for Youth Mental Health and Wellbeing. I'm a social worker. I'm originally from New York, and what I hope to do today is to normalize and simplify the complex issue of mental health. And that's it.
Hey guys, I'm Deborah Chen. I graduated last year, and I want to show you some reason why I want to be part of this mental health panel. So I realized after I graduated Mission that a lot of my classmates started voicing out how the school kind of make them feel more depressed, and how they couldn't able to voice out their concerns because they did not want to feel vulnerable and they had to fulfill this perfect image. Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I'm always not speaking well. And I realized these issues itself kind of manifest by hiding and not by hiding himself, and to the point that the problem grew into a big issue that most of us cannot handle. And I guess I can share my story of my experience, my mental health experience here at Mission. So back in 9th grade, I didn't know about mental health until one of my teachers told an incident where a student in the past had committed suicide by going from the Caltrain because her grades were not good enough. And I'm thinking, why would she do that? And later on in 9th grade, I heard someone in our school passed away, and I saw the whole school dropped. What I mean by that, no one really could talk. Some teachers just could not teach because it was just devastating. And I know this happened again. And I felt like when I'm seeing this affect everyone, then it kind of shows that each person is tied in with each other, and that each of you are really valuable. And I kind of felt that because of this situation, most people were more, I'm not sure, either more afraid to talk about it because they don't want to think as people say, oh, he's going to commit suicide, or oh, this person's depressed. And I felt like that kind of image is not something most people want to be associated with it, which is why I'm more comfortable talking about right now because I'm graduated. And later in sophomore year, I started feeling more depressed, not because of school, but because of family issues. My grandmother was not feeling well, parents were fighting, and I felt like the friends I had kind of just left me out of personal issues. Junior year turns out to be the best year I had in high school, ironically, because I did find a good support group, and I did feel support, even though one of the classes kind of killed me a bit. Pre-calc, I'm joking. Senior then arrived, and I thought it would be the best year, because like, hey, it's the last year, I'm getting out of here for once. Not that it's a bad place, but like, I don't like the mission bubble. And the problem was, like, during college application, my parents thought that since they did them by themselves, I could handle it by myself. That was not the case. I felt like I was really stressed, especially with the heavy class load. When the college decisions came out and my parents found out I got waitlisted for UC Davis, they got really angry at me. They told me, you disobeyed me. Why didn't you put down this as your major? Why didn't you do this correctly? I'm thinking, yelling's not going to change the past. And during that time, I already think, should I just commit suicide? It wasn't because of that. It's because I felt like all the work I did was not for anything. And when one of my cats passed away, when my parents told me that this friend of mine is the reason why I didn't get into college, I feel like this is not a situation I want to be. And when you're at the position, when you're holding a knife against yourself, you're thinking, is this really what I want in my life like? And I thought about it, and I looked at the knife and it says a friend's name, and realized that friend of mine does not want me to be in a position where I want to die. Realized the teachers, the friends here I made, and everyone else does not want me to be dead. Because there's more in life than this. And the reason why I want to address this is because, like, most of my friends have gone through the similar experience I have. And I realized that in order to change this, we should be more open about our experiences of suffering, and realize that none of us are perfect. It's okay to not be perfect, admit that you have these problems itself, and that the situation yourself can change to a better one if you don't keep holding on. We don't know what's going to be like in the future, and that's okay. But I feel like when we're in an environment where we're competing with each other and not seeing each other as people, then that's kind of a difficult environment to be in. So I guess my advice I want to live in is, like, be a community. You don't know who's going to be gone, and you don't know, you might miss this moment where you could be someone who can save a life.
Oh, I feel a little choked up. So, not because of my own story, because of Deborah's. So it's just very nice that you shared that. All right, so my name is Amanda Morrison, and I am a assistant professor at Cal State East Bay, and I'm also a licensed clinical psychologist, and I work in a small group practice in Menlo Park where we see older adolescents and adults who have problems with anxiety and depression. So we were asked just to tell a little bit about how, I'm going to talk about how I came to be interested in the mental health field and a little bit more about my personal experience. So I would say that I grew up in a household that didn't really acknowledge emotions. My parents, I wouldn't say, had the best relationship with each other, but it was a great childhood. We just really weren't open with each other. We didn't talk about how we were feeling. And so I was really confused when I got to high school, and I started noticing a lot of friends struggling with things that I had never heard of, I didn't recognize. I had a lot of friends who smoked weed before school, so maybe it was a different high school environment than here. I'm getting the vibe. But I had a lot of friends who were struggling with substance use issues. I had a few friends who had issues with depression, one friend who had a really serious eating disorder. And it just made me really confused, really curious. How could I know these people for so long, and now all of a sudden we're in the same school, we have the same friends, and some people are starting to develop these like really serious problems, others maybe not so much. And how could we not recognize in each other when people are really struggling? It seemed to come as a surprise to a lot of people once these mental health problems started to emerge. So that's when I got really interested in psychology. I decided to major in it. I decided to get a doctoral degree in psychology. And it wasn't really until I was in a master's program that I had a little bit, well, no, that's totally not true. Let me back up a little bit. You guys are in high school, and I know some of you probably struggle now with academic pressure, with social pressure. College can also brings some pressure. And for me, my hardest time was my first year in college. I had friends pretty easily in high school. I played sports, I was involved in things. And then transitioning to college, I didn't live in the dorm, so I would commute to school, I'd show up and I'd go to class, and then I'd go to work. And I had a really hard time with social anxiety, just initiating conversations with classmates, talking to other people who I didn't know. So I would say during my first year or two in college, I had a really hard time developing any friendships. I had friends at work, but it was like a different vibe. I needed friends who were struggling through college, who had the academic pressures that I had, and it was really hard. Even to this day, my social anxiety with public speaking, my heart is beating fast, I turn really red in the face, I get red chest. When I go on job interviews, I feel the same way. When I was dating, I felt the same way. And it was not until I reached a doctoral program when I decided I was going to focus on being a clinical psychologist and focusing especially on social anxiety disorder, trying to understand why social anxiety disorder develops, who's at risk for it, who's vulnerable to it, and also trying to understand why social anxiety disorder and depression occur so often together. Because I can speak from my own personal experience that lacking close, trusting relationships in my first couple of years of college because of anxiety, that's then what contributed to me having a harder time with mood. And I don't think I ever had a really serious depressed period, but I was certainly very lonely. And that made college a little less exciting and fun. I'd always thought it would be a great time, and it was pretty tough. So I decided that I wanted to come today because something that's really important to me is increasing awareness of social anxiety disorder. Have you guys ever heard the phrase, the squeaky wheel gets the grease? It's basically the people who are the most outspoken, who are the ones who get attention. And it turns out that people with social anxiety disorder, because of their social anxiety, have a hard time speaking out. And so not a lot of people know what it is, but it's actually extremely common. About 13% of the population will experience social anxiety disorder at some point in their lives. And social anxiety disorder is just the very extreme end. There's also people who have moderate social anxiety, and I think most people know what public speaking anxiety feels like. So I just wanted to let people know that it's extremely common, to reduce stigma for it, and to let people know that there are extremely effective treatments for anxiety disorders should you find yourself in that place. And that's it.
Hi, everyone. Before I continue, I just want to thank all the speakers for being here. I want to thank the MSJ Mental Health Committee for putting this together, not only giving us a chance to speak, but giving you guys the opportunity to learn more about mental health, its illnesses, and how difficult it can be at times. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, the reason that I'm here is to speak for those who can't speak for themselves, because the circumstances surrounding mental health can be extreme at times, and it can make talking about emotions and experiences very difficult. So what I'm about to share is something that only a few of my closest friends have known about me up until this point, and that's that I've been fighting depression for a little over 3 years now, and in many ways I'm still healing to this day. And the reason behind all of it might seem a little bit strange to some people, but it's because that I'm still looking for that special someone, a special girl, to be specific. I'm sure that I'm not the only one who's felt alone or unloved or even worthless for that matter in this room. But I've been told on multiple occasions that I am too nice, as if it was a bad thing. I've been told that I'll be nothing more than a friend. And in many instances, when trying to impress people, I came across as creepy. In retrospect, but growing up and being reminded over and over that I can't love someone, I can't make someone happy the way that I've always wanted to, it sucks, for lack of a better word. I can only dream of what it's like, holding someone's hand and, feeling someone next to me and knowing that my presence is their happiness. I can only dream of what it's like getting married or being a dad for that matter. And I get scared whenever I get close to someone because I can't express the feelings that I want to express. I have to bottle it up, and it hurts. I'm practically not myself at that point. And, it makes me think maybe my feelings don't mean anything to anybody. Maybe I should kill myself. I've had this thought process happens all the time. I think that every time I see a couple, every time I see a dad walk his kid down the street, every time I see my friends hugging each other, and love is everywhere. It's sung about on the radio, it's on TV, and my friends seem to have it, and I don't know what it feels like. I can only sit back and watch, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's only so much I can say within the minutes given to me. My life at home is another story. But like I said in the beginning, I'm not here just to gloat about myself. I'm here for those who can't speak for themselves, and I can't sit around knowing that there are people out there who felt the way I felt when all they needed was just a little love. So I'm here to give you guys that love and to give you guys a little bit of hope if you need it.
Okay, so now we'll move on to our question and answer session. Again, if you have any questions, just write them down and raise your hand, or if you have any topics you would like us to discuss. So our first question is, what are some ways that have helped you maintain healthy mental health despite stress brought about by being in competitive environments?
Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and take a stab at that question. For me, I've dealt with depression. I've experimented in many ways. I've opened up to friends, but the way that I've coped the best is through comic books, and I love comic books because these are superheroes, and they have powers. They seem invincible, and they go around saving people all the time. But what made them a hero in the first place is something traumatic most of the time. And like Batman, he lost his parents. Spider-Man, he lost Uncle Ben. And knowing that it's real people behind these stories, it's real writers who've written these stories, and knowing that people have gone through what I've gone through, felt what I've felt, it's comforting in that way. So yeah, that's one of the ways that I cope. So.
I think the question you're asking, what helps people in competitive environments? Yeah. I think competitive environments are really difficult because I can give advice because this is what I try to do, is to try to really just focus on myself, to focus on my own progress, to focus on what it is that I'm achieving that was better than I did yesterday. Because if I focus on what other people are achieving, there will literally always be someone who's achieving more than I'm achieving, who's smarter than I am, who's better looking than I am, who has this other thing better than I do. So in the end, I think it's about trying to reframe this. What am I getting out of being better than this other person? Am I getting myself closer to being happier, being closer to doing the things that are valuable to me, having better relationships with people? And if I can't answer any of those questions yes, then I just have to try to let go of the competition. And that's hard for me because sometimes I feel competitive too. But you have to step back and recognize what it is actually getting you. If at the end of the day all you can say is that you're better than that other person, I have found that ends up wearing off really quickly. It ends up not mattering much at all, and then you wasted your time.
This might be a little bit of a controversial way to look at it, but if you do kind of say, let's accept the fact that I am competitive, I can't do anything about it, I can't stop myself from comparing myself to other people. Something that I find very powerful is just realizing that rationally, pretty much all of the comparisons that I am going to be making are on the basis of things I don't really know. So if I'm comparing myself to another person, I'm comparing, say, one aspect of our identity, but I have no idea what the other stuff happening in their life is. I'm not comparing everything happening in my life to what they're experiencing. And the way that I have found to break down my desire to compare myself to other people is just realizing that if you like line everything up and compare yourself on all the possible fronts, like what are the MSJ like stakes for comparison usually? You go academic, you go extracurricular, you go personal life, like the typical ones, right? There's pretty much never a direct comparison. And what I've found is doing that and walking through every step of it makes me realize that I really can't come up with a who's better, who's not better. And yes, I understand that this is not really getting to the root of the problem, that you shouldn't compare yourself to other people in the first place, but it's kind of a middle ground to mitigate the fact that we might be in an environment where it's hard to like de-wire that from our brains, realizing that any sort of comparison you make is going to be ignoring a bunch of other factors that totally influence like the one axis you're comparing on, is something I've found useful.
Okay, our next question is an audience question. How can you start getting help?
So for me, I didn't go to a therapist right away. I didn't go to any kind of doctor right away. I reached out to my friends first, and I wouldn't say that that's the only way to go or that's the right way to go, but I think it's appropriate to try and talk to your friends about it first because they're the ones that are around you the most, and they're your support system. They're your friends for a reason. So it's okay to open up to them, and if that's not comfortable, then we have counselors here. You know, everyone here is with open arms. So if it ever gets to a point where you're hurting yourself or if you're hurting others around you, that's the point where you should seek professional help.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Wait.
If you do realize that like one of your friends has a serious problem, it's not just like they send you like a sad face on Messenger. It's like they legitimately have probably a mental disorder. Please tell like the counselors or like an adult like immediately, because it's so much better to have your friend like be angry at you for a week and block you on Facebook than to have a dead friend. So please get help if you believe it's necessary.
Okay, our next question is, many people who have mental illness refuse to recognize it or recognize it, but don't want to be saved. How can one help someone like this? People either refuse to recognize they have mental illness or know they have it, but don't want to be saved. How do you help someone like this? I guess that's a common issue that a lot of my classmates have faced, and I guess a way to approach it is let them take their time and open it up, because you can't force someone. You force someone, then you get drastic results. And I guess a way, if they don't want to be saved, I guess they want to take the time to understand the situation themselves and see why are they feeling like this. Can they get help without bringing other people into their problem? And it is difficult to see them suffer by themselves and feel helpless about it. And I don't know, I'm the type of person who tries to like do surprise gifts to show like, hey, you matter. Here's a little candy. Here's a cookie I bake. It has no nuts, trust me. And in that way, you kind of say like, oh, this person is someone I can open to. This person I can show like, hey, I am not feeling well. I don't want to keep hitting myself in the head for every mistake I did. I feel guilty. And I guess overall, it's like everyone does go through the similar path of feeling guilty or feeling like they don't know what to do. And most everyone don't know what to do. And I guess the way is just try to keep being their friend through the hard times and reach out to them more than you usually would.
I think from personal experience, I do have some friends currently who are in that situation. And, you know, you do what you can. You don't want to push them so far to the point where, you know, things get worse. I don't think that, you know, it's always appropriate. It's not necessarily appropriate to ask them to find out what's wrong, you know, constantly bugging them about it. It could come across as annoying. But I think for me, what helped me the most is just knowing that someone was there, someone was willing to spend time with me, you know, oh, let's go hang out. let's do this together. You know, knowing that you are appreciated, you know, that helps really, it helps with if you have a mental illness. And yeah.
What do you do if your parents don't believe you have a mental illness?
You tell somebody else that you're struggling. Parents are tough. They're really tough, and they don't get it, and sometimes it's their own fear that makes it so that they don't get it. But growing up, I found, for me, if I told somebody else to tell them, my parent, whatever it is that I wanted them to know, they received the information better from someone else than from me. So if you can find somebody from your community that gets it, to talk to your parents about it, that might be a good avenue to go.
For parents, it might be hard to talk about because everyone has different parents, everyone has different experiences with their parents. But for me personally, I remember vividly, me and my parents were going to Costco, and we were putting gas in our car, and so I had to roll up my sleeves so that I wouldn't get any gas on my sleeves. But at that time, I started, you know, harming myself again. I started cutting. And my mom saw my scars again after several months, and she looked at me, and, you know, she gave me this weird look, and she was like, "Oh, again?" You know, and she smiled, and, you know, she just ruffled my hair and walked back to the car. And in that moment, of course, my heart sunk because clearly she doesn't understand that, you know, I was in a lot of pain, and that was my way of, you know, releasing that. But at the same time, it was then that I learned that just because she doesn't understand that doesn't mean that she doesn't love me, doesn't mean that if I died, she would also be devastated. So, you know, even if your parents can't understand what you're going through, they love you with all their heart, and I had to learn that the hard way. So.
Many people believe that seeking help from professionals is too time-consuming, expensive, or would worsen the familial situation. What would you say to these people who try to cope by themselves? Is it ever okay to stay silent?
All those things are very true about accessing mental health, and we're doing our very best to change that. But while it may be preferred to sit in silence, that just makes your situation worse, because all you're doing is stewing and stewing and stewing and having increased emotions and symptoms, and causing yourself to feel worse than you actually want to feel. So I recommend that you communicate with somebody and tell someone. Secrets are no good. They do no one good. Because by the time you do tell someone, that person may feel bad that they didn't even know all this time. So try your best if you can to just communicate with someone, let them know just a little bit, a snippet of what's going on so that they can be supportive.
Okay. What should you do when you think that a friend is going through depression?
So I would say that a great general resource for a lot of these situations, it's hard to give blanket advice when we get a question on a note card. I honestly am a big proponent of suicide hotlines in terms of just like, I think my friend is struggling with something. What can I do? After having staffed a hotline myself, I can tell you that most of the calls that we get are from people saying like, hey, I think my friend might be depressed. I think they were having a panic attack the other day. I like have no idea what to do. I've never done this kind of thing before. And the person on the other end of the hotline can talk you through your specific situation, help you think of like what questions to ask, what might be helpful, how to best support your friend, and brainstorm options. They can connect you to other resources. And I really think reaching out to professionals while maintaining your friend's confidentiality, but saying like, I'm not entirely sure how I can best handle this situation is a great way to go about it. Just because you might not be an expert doesn't mean you're any less critical to this mission, because you're the one who's noticing the symptoms, right? You're around them all the time, and it's really important that even if you don't feel like you're an expert in the situation. It's hard to turn you into an expert after one panel, but know that you can reach out to people who can help you reason through options better. So like some of the 1-800-273-TALK, I believe it is. If you just like Google suicide hotlines or mental health crisis hotlines, you'll find a ton, and pretty much all of them will be happy to talk to someone who is trying to support someone else struggling with a mental health concern. I think a general good strategy with generally being a good friend when someone's having a tough time is to check in with them, and like if you're, say, like taking them shopping, you're trying to distract them, you want to ask them to talk about it, you can ask them straight up, like, what would be helpful right now? What's going to make you feel better? What do you want me to do? And if they don't have the answer to that, that's okay. Give them the option. Say like, hey, you might not have the answer right now, but when you do, please tell me because I want to help. If you do try something with them, check in and say like, is this helping or is it making it worse? Just ask them. Keep checking in and don't try to force anything on them. At the end of the day, from personal experience, if somebody doesn't want to do something or doesn't want something to change, you trying to force something on them is probably going to make it worse. It's going to make you feel frustrated and emotionally invested in a way you shouldn't be. So really, like, let them run the process. It is their experience. And whenever you need advice, reach out to like a counselor, reach out to a peer mentor from Peer Resource, reach out to someone at a hotline, and they can give you more specific advice on your situation.
Okay, this is a quick reminder to write down any questions you have. Okay, so our next question is, what should you do if you try to confide in friends or even your parents, but they accuse you of using your anxiety or mental illness as an excuse or safety card?
I realize that, being the one who hears that, being the one who has to hear that, your illness is what's making you lazy, is the reason why you're lazy. I think when it comes to friends, those people aren't really your friends if they're telling you that you're being lazy because of these reasons that you're giving. Like, your friends should be there to support you, and if they're not doing that, then they're not your friends. I mean, there are better resources out there who are willing to help you, like us. We're up here with open arms, and I do believe that there are plenty of other people out there who are willing to approach you, who are willing to talk to you. So find those people.
Does anybody want to address the second part of that question? What do you do if your parents are the one placing that on you?
I guess when you, let me think about it. Sorry. I guess when you're in that position where people think of judging you based on your mental illness or you're depressed, in that position where he says that person's not your friend, that could be devastating, especially when you believe and invest in this friendship. I have been telling a lot of people, like, you have to find the right person, you have to find the right companion, and that's really hard to do. Like, most people sometimes struggle and find someone they can trust in terms of like someone they can say, hey, I am dying, please help me. And I guess when you're doing like the mental feeling like, I'm sorry, I just get tongue twisted, but when you feel like you are really struggling and no one's gonna help you, take the time to like calm yourself down and realize that other people are also struggling this silently, and that even though you don't know what to do, try to like reach out and take a brave step towards someone you believe who could listen to you, who could help you when you need them. And sometimes it not be a classmate, it could be a teacher. I mean, there are great teachers at Mission, or a counselor. Like, I know Mrs. Andrews is really sweet, and I mean, it really depends like how you want to approach it or how you want to be addressed, because it's your life. You get to choose what you want to do, but please don't let your choices bring yourself down or bring others people down, because you do matter.
I mean, I think the situation really sucks and it's really hard. The best thing I can tell you is to advocate for yourself. And some language around potentially doing this, things that I have found useful, is making analogies to physical health, saying that like, hey, if somebody's broken their leg, they're going to not be able to do a certain number of things, but over time they're going to say, learn to use crutches, find alternate paths to the stairs, find like people who they can reach out to on days when things are particularly painful. And eventually over time, they're going to figure out ways to live despite this broken leg for however long they have this broken leg. Say it's like a chronic illness, right? Like communicating with the person you're talking to, whether this is your parents or not, and saying like, hey, a mental illness is as valid as a physical illness, and I am working on this in this way. This is how you can effectively support me. And at this moment in time, or for the foreseeable future, I might not be able to do this in an optimal way, but let's figure out strategies to work around the fact that I am having these symptoms. And how do I like deliver on my duties and responsibilities irrespective of the fact that I am having these symptoms? And I find analogies to physical health very helpful. And I think if you look up a lot of stuff on like stigma around mental health, just reading other people's stories and reading language and like online guides on mental health stigma and awareness can help you be a better advocate for yourself, and knowing how people talk about this and make a case for how they want to be treated and why they should be treated the way they want to be treated. Earlier in one of the earlier panels, somebody talked about just generally like demanding that like, hey, this is what I know I need, this is what I am struggling with. You have to kind of be a little bit outspoken within the healthcare system and in general when you are asking for help. And I think that's challenging. I have found looking at language and stories and guides online to be very helpful.
I just want to add something really quickly. We've addressed if you were the one receiving this, but if you were the one actually saying these things to other people, you might not have bad intentions for them. You just want to spit out how you feel and, you know, the truth about how you feel. But know that when you say things like that, like, oh, you're just saying this because you're lazy or you want to, you know, avoid your problems. When you say something like that to someone with a mental illness, it's not only not cool, it's also very dangerous. It only makes things worse as it already is. And sometimes they might even already know that, you know, you might be thinking that. They already know that, but once it actually comes out of your mouth and they hear it, you know, like I said, it only makes situations worse, so.
Some people are alone, but they act like they're not. They tend to make friends, but aren't able to make close friends that could help them with some issues. Is there any way to help them?
Have you guys heard of duck syndrome? Anybody heard of duck syndrome? Raise your hand. Okay, well, only 4 people raised their hand. Duck syndrome is when everybody looks real cool on the surface, right? Everybody looks like they have their life together, they're coasting, yeah, it's finals week, but I'm cool. But underneath, their legs are tripping out. They are trying to get to the next destination, they don't know where they're going, things are out of control. You can see underneath the surface, guys. People know. You were all at the same school. You were all in very similar classes. You were all taking very similar caseloads, course loads. So you're not alone. You guys are doing very, very similar things and underneath very similar pressure. Let people know. Share that pressure. And I know because it's a competitive environment, that can be hard because then you'll be perceived as weak or they're not performing well and so I have the upper hand or whatever it is. But you guys are gonna leave high school and go on and do very different things. This is not the last stop on the bus for you, any of you, regardless of what it is that you choose to do. So come up on the land and let us see those feet flipping around all over the place, okay? Don't just chill out on the water and let your legs do all sorts of stuff under there. Come up on the surface sometime.
I'm probably seeing this from the lens, the bias of having talked about social anxiety and focusing on social anxiety, but what I hear in the question also is somebody saying, I can have like superficial relationships, but I feel alone and it's hard to develop like an intimate connection with someone else. I'm not talking necessarily sexual or romantic. I'm just talking about having a truly trusting and open relationship where you can be honest with the other person. And coming from a social anxiety perspective, the duck metaphor makes a whole lot of sense, and then there's this added layer that the duck is anxious to show that they're treading water underneath, and I can really sympathize with that, empathize with that. There's this, like, I know I need to show other people what I'm feeling, but I'm really anxious to do that. What's their reaction going to be? How do I say this? What if they don't want to be friends with me afterwards? Isn't it better just to keep it inside? I can just keep faking it. Yeah, you can, but you're going to be constantly yearning for that close relationship. What we know from research is that facing, this sounds so cliche, sadly, like this is the secret to cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety disorders. Facing your fears works, and it's the only way to get over fears. The only way to get over social anxiety is to start doing the things that you fear. Public speaking is not the thing that I wake up in the morning and want to go do, but when I'm offered an opportunity to do it, I do it because I know if I don't, the anxiety is going to get worse. And if I do it, there's a chance the anxiety is going to get better over time. So yeah, I just wanted to add that to the duck story, that the duck might also be anxious. That's hard.
Counseling can be considered as courage to find help. Why does mental counseling have a negative stigma in American society?
I feel like I don't necessarily have an answer on how to fix this, but I think the way that I look at it is when you have a physical illness, it impairs things like your ability to walk, or your ability to move in a certain way. When you have a mental illness, it affects your behavior, it affects your mood, and potentially like what people consider to be someone's personality, and your personality is an assessment of your competency, right? So there's like, because of the fact that mental illness is so wrapped up in our behaviors and how we present ourselves, people are bad at kind of drawing a line on what is a function of the mental illness symptoms and what is like this person's actual identity. And a mental illness comes to be taken as a sign of weakness or lack of competency. And I think that it can be really challenging to, I don't really have an answer again, to draw that line and kind of attribute like what comes from where. And I think that is where the stigma comes from. But what I do know is that a sign of strength is reaching out. A sign of strength is wanting to do something about it and wanting to change the circumstances around it, wanting to change your experience and make your experience better. So while I get where the stigma around mental illness and acknowledging mental illness comes from, what I do believe is that if it is something that you struggle with, deciding that you want to work on it is one of the most resilient things that you can do.
About that, I think my guess behind why there is a stigma behind mental health is because a lot of people with a mental illness, say depression, oftentimes when you're with these people or if you're friends with them, they don't meet you with tears every time you see them. Oftentimes they're laughing with you. They're the ones watching movies with you. But it's when they go home, it's when they're, by themselves. That's when all the emotions come out. That's when they feel their worst. And when, when these people admit that they're suffering from depression or whatever mental illness, it might seem like unreal. It might seem like, oh, you always seem so happy. You always seem so outgoing. But that's not necessarily the case. And I want to extend off of that and say that, be careful what you say, because you never know. The person right next to you could be really hurt, and you have no idea. So.
My friend always talks about having depression, but then laughs about it later. I can't tell if she is joking or not, so I don't know what to do. When I ask her if she is going through something, she says no. I don't know how to get through. What should I do?
So I kind of remember being that friend because my instinct when I meet people is to like smile and laugh and try to make them laugh. And so I think it is really surprising when you find out. And a lot of times like people will cope with things like that by making jokes about it. And then if you try to confront them about it, they were doing that joke as like a coping mechanism, right? They were trying to do that so they wouldn't feel like they have to take it seriously. And now you won't take it seriously and they can pass it off as it not being serious. But if you notice that this is persistent, and unless they're like a dank memer and they're just literally doing this just for laughs, like unless they're like that, you should probably at least tell an adult in your life, or at least tell your other friends, or at least get people involved. Like, it's so much better to be safe than it is to risk it.
Yeah, what Emily said is really true. Just because it might seem like they're pretending, it in no ways doesn't mean that it's not. I mean, I used to do that very subtly. And if they say they don't want to talk about it, then don't talk about it. You don't need to pry around and figure out what's wrong with them. You know, that's their way of releasing a little bit at a time. And whenever they feel comfortable enough to, you know, talk about more things, that's when you should talk about them. It's not really your job to diagnose them or try to figure out what's wrong.
Okay, this is our last question. I hate to ask this, but what is the financial burden of getting help? For instance, I know that things like the ER can get expensive.
Yeah, this is a very serious issue. Mental health can cost a lot of money. There are some options where it doesn't necessarily. So if we're going to talk about like the highest costing things, if you go see a clinical psychologist sometimes in an outpatient setting, maybe they have a private practice. If you live in San Francisco, you might be paying $400 or $500 an hour. This could take anywhere from 3 months, once a week, to a few years. It can be extraordinarily expensive. At the group practice that I work in, we charge about $250 an hour. It can be extraordinarily expensive. That being said, sometimes insurance providers will cover the cost of mental health services. Not always. You should definitely check with your insurance. Sometimes they will cover it for a certain number of sessions, maybe 10 sessions. One resource that I didn't know about until I was a graduate student in clinical psychology is that if there are universities local to you who have a clinical psychology training program, they will often have a clinic of graduate students who are training to be therapists who will see clients for very, very low rates. It's usually based on a sliding scale, which means it's based on your income, but sometimes I would charge people $5 a session. If I had a very, very low income client, I would say, what can you pay? If it was $1, then that's what I would accept for the session. So you're getting people who are in training. They are maybe not as good as they're going to be someday, but they're always supervised by a licensed supervisor. So there are some options like that out there, and I'm sure there's other options as well, but it can be very expensive.
Okay, a quick follow-up question. What can we do to make mental health care more affordable and accessible?
Funny you should ask that, but some of the work that we're doing as a part of the Center for Youth Mental Health and Wellbeing is we're trying to pilot the first holistic wellness center in the community. So it's not a part of Stanford, and what it is, it's to support youth between the ages of 12 to 25. And it's an opportunity for young people as early as 12 can receive counseling without their parents knowing. And a lot of young people don't know that. And if you don't have money for it, there's money that can pay for it. So if you're somebody who would like counseling, don't want your parents to know, and you don't know how to pay for it, there's options. And you can send me an email, and I can provide you with that information so that you know what those options are. But what the center is trying to do is we're trying to create an environment where young people can come regardless of their ability to pay so that they can receive service. So look out for it in the next year or so. It's been a process because we don't have universal health care here, like other countries like Australia, where the government says, here's all this money, build this thing and provide the service at no cost. And so we're really working to be able to provide that resource to the young people in California.
Just for purposes of maybe like de-scaring you a little bit, I really encourage you to look into your specific insurance policies. Therapy has been extremely affordable for my family. And also when you get to college, this is pretty standard for most university like you have to get insurance if you're on a college campus. And this is pretty standard for university insurance. Like Harvard University Health Services provides like free counseling, and we get free mental health therapy. And I'm like, this is very standard. Most of my friends at schools across the country, university healthcare is pretty great. You kind of just have to ask and advocate for yourself again, express what you want, express why you think you need it. And again, I would say just ask. I'm not necessarily saying like you know what your options are going to look like, but don't be terrified by the whole perception around it's really expensive and inaccessible. Yeah, and I would also say it's useful to talk to the counselors at MSJ. I know that there's a lot of stigma around. My counselor is going to put in my letter of recommendation to college that I have a mental illness. I have talked to every single one of the counselors at MSJ about my mental illnesses, and I did fine. So I like seriously encourage you to go talk to your counselors about mental illnesses and mental health care. They are very helpful. I have had my counselor have very productive conversations with my parents where they've talked to them about like what I was experiencing. And there is also a school psychologist on campus, and they can probably help talk to you about whether that's an appropriate option for you.
And I know not everyone has health insurance, whether you believe that or not, but there are resources available. Send me an email. I'm happy to provide those to you as well. But yes, don't be too scared about your options.
So please join me in giving a huge round of applause to all. So we really want to encourage you guys to continue these conversations with your peers sitting around you. Continue this conversation with the teachers who brought you here, because the whole point of this event is that we address mental health as an ongoing issue that is constantly impacting all of us. So thank you for listening. Thank you for paying attention and listening to their stories. It's up to us to be part of the solution, not to be a part of the problem.
If you have any questions unanswered, you can reach us at msjmentalhealth@gmail.com, all lowercase and no spaces.